Jane Hume, welcome to the program.
Good to be with you, David.
So Angus Taylor hasn't called for a federal royal commission, only Tim Wilson has. Is the coalition's position that there should be a federal royal commission alongside a Victorian royal commission?
Well, David, it is passing strange that Anthony Albanese has shown such extraordinary lack of curiosity, lack of interest into the extent of corruption on construction sites right around the country, particularly when there is federal Commonwealth taxpayer money that's been involved. The suburban rail loop is the best example of that. Even after knowing that there were at least 4 allegations of corruption on the suburban rail loop site, Anthony Albanese committed $3.8 billion of Commonwealth taxpayers' money to that project. And I think that there are questions that should be answered about that. Now, we support the Victorians having a Royal Commission into corruption in the construction industry. And Jess Wilson has been right to lead the charge on this, say that she will work closely with the new Premier down there to make sure that it actually gets to the bottom of corruption, that it isn't just a political fix, that it fixes the systemic problem that the construction industry in Victoria has faced for so long.
So is Tim Wilson then out on his own calling for a federal royal commission, or is it the coalition's policy?
Well, we would like to see Anthony Albanese take a more forward-leaning stance into investigation of corruption. In fact, he could do
what
that
does that
immediately.
Mean? Sorry, Senator, does that mean a federal royal commission?
No, it doesn't. But what it does mean is that there is an option to have a Senate inquiry into corruption in the construction industry. It's something that we've been talking about for some time. My colleague, Senator Maria Kovacic, has gathered more than 50,000 signatures on a petition calling for a Senate inquiry into corruption in the construction industry. We've been blocked every step of the way. The Greens don't want it, Labor don't want it. But if you are serious about integrity, if you are serious about stamping out corruption in construction, which is causing costs for construction to rise so far and so fast, and all Australians pay a price for that, well, why not start with a Senate inquiry? That would be a good step. But we do support Jess Wilson in her quest to have a Royal Commission in Victoria.
Okay. Jacinda Allen had been facing criticism across a range of issues, including the work from home rules that she wanted to introduce, giving workers a guaranteed right to 2 days working from home each week. Business was highly critical of this plan. The new Premier is now looking at winding back these rules. Do you think he should?
I think the new Premier should be looking at winding back an awful lot of the commitments that Jacinda Allen has made. Certainly the business community has rightly expressed concern about this policy because, let's face it, the Victorian economy is tanking. Businesses are declaring insolvency on a daily basis, or they're packing up and moving interstate. Our unemployment rate in Victoria is the highest in the country. Our youth unemployment is more than double the national rate. This should be the alarm bells for Victorian leaders to make sure that we inject new life into the economy, not keep holding it back.
One question that the Liberals aren't yet answering in Victoria is whether they would govern in coalition with One Nation. At the federal level, Angus Taylor says you won't do that. Andrew Bragg says you'll be pragmatic. Where do you stand? No, we will not be governing in coalition with One Nation. We are not forming a coalition with One Nation. I think we couldn't be any clearer than that. We have a coalition. The Liberals are already in coalition with the National Party. That coalition has been the foundation of very successful governments for 80 years now, and it will continue to be so. So what's Andrew Bragg getting at when he says you'd be pragmatic? If you're in a situation where you can't form a majority, would you look at a minority government with the support of One Nation at least?
Well, that's an extraordinary hypothetical. We've
seen
minority governments in the past. Well, but there isn't an election for at least 18 months, David, so of course it's a hypothetical question. Governments have formed minority governments in the past with all sorts of parties. Our intention is to win outright, and we do that by making sure that we present a credible plan and a credible team to deliver that plan. That's exactly what Angus Taylor and I have been doing for the last 23, 24 weeks that he has been the leader, and that's what we'll continue to do for the next 18 months prior to the federal election.
OK, so just so everyone's clear, definitely no coalition, but a minority government taking support from One Nation is possible.
No, that's your words, that's not my words. I've said that we have no plans, no intention. There is no plans to have a coalition with One Nation. That is our commitment. We are already in coalition. We plan to govern as a coalition, as a Liberal national coalition, as we have done for 80 years. And at the next election, Australians will have a genuine choice between a terrible Labor government that has seen their standard of living go backwards so far and so fast, or One Nation that has no plans, that simply has slogans. A credible alternative is a Liberal national coalition led by Angus Taylor.
But possibly relying on the support of One Nation or not?
David, you keep trying to put words in my mouth that do not exist.
No, I'm just asking the question.
We are not in coalition with One Nation.
No, that's not the question. It's whether you would govern in a minority government with support from One Nation or not.
David, it's 18 months until the next election. We have a long way to go. We are concentrating on making sure that we speak to every Australian out there and demonstrate that the Coalition's plan to lower taxes, lower energy prices, lower migration, build more homes and put Australians first is the appealing policy set for them, that they can see their hopes and dreams and aspirations reflected in what it is that the Coalition, the Liberal National Coalition, can offer them at the next election.
Let's look at your portfolio. Industrial relations. Have you made any decision yet on any Labor laws that you would repeal?
Well, I'm not going to announce new policies here on television, as I'm sure you would understand, David.
Feel free.
But there are some reviews of Labor legislation that is currently sitting on the Minister's desk. So we'll wait to see what the results of those reviews are. But I think you should probably understand, and your viewers should understand, the lens through which the Coalition looks at industrial relations. We think that any industrial relations system should be fair. It should be fair for employees, certainly. It should be fair for employers, and it should be fair for consumers, because they're the three elements of any industrial relations system, and that's how the economy is driven. Most importantly, though, it should also be a simple system, because when we have a complicated system, then mistakes are made inadvertently, and that costs everybody more. When you get to a stage when even the ABC has inadvertently mispaid its staff, you know that the system is way too complicated. And thirdly, most importantly, an industrial relations system should drive productivity. Previous Labor governments have understood this. The Hawke government is a great example, because unless you have that driving of productivity, well, then your standard of living goes backwards. You can't have economic growth without inflation, and numerous Reserve Bank governors have reiterated that point. So that's what we want to see in industrial relations.
Based on those principles, do the same job, same pay laws provide the simple system and higher productivity that you're talking about?
Well, I think the entire system we know at the moment is not simple, and it isn't fair, and it isn't driving productivity. Now, I'm not going to get into individual pieces of legislation. As I said, there are reviews of those legislation sitting on the Minister's desk. I'm looking forward to the Labor government's response to the reviews of its own legislation to see whether they think that it's working. But let's be honest, you don't need to go too far to see a banking up of claims that Fair Work, that small businesses are feeling that the system is stacked against them, and that the economy is not benefiting from a more flexible industrial relations system that would help drive productivity, drive growth and deliver prosperity for everybody.
Angus Taylor has denied making any payments to a right-wing Liberal Party sub-faction that's currently being examined by the New South Wales corruption watchdog ICAC. Amongst other things, this group had apparently been trying to knock Susan Lee out of the Parliament. Are you curious, Jane Hume, to know if Angus Taylor had anything to do with this group?
Well, can we be very clear here that the leader of the Liberals is not a party to any of the matters that ICAC are referring to. He hasn't been approached by the ICAC. And to be honest, I feel that this is so distant from him. I agree with Chris Minns on this one, and I don't say that very often, but I do agree with Chris Minns on this one. ICAC should be allowed to go through its processes free of political interference, free of commentary from politicians, and be allowed to run its course.
However, we still don't know, despite many questions this week about what Angus Taylor's involvement with this group was, whether he knew what they were up to. Yes, that's a matter for ICAC, but for the Liberal Party, have you asked him, or is this sort of activity in the Liberal Party not a problem?
No, of course not. I'm his deputy leader. I speak to Angus almost every day and we speak about numerous things. I'm not going to get into what it is that we speak about. But I do want to point out... But
you've asked him about this? Can you at least say that?
No, I'm not going to get into any conversations that I've had with Angus. They're private conversations between a leader and a deputy leader. And they happen every single day on so many issues.
But is this sort of sub-factional activity, is that okay in the Liberal Party, or would you at least condemn what they've been up to?
I have to admit that I don't know all the details of this.
You're the deputy leader of the Liberal Party.
This is a New South Wales ICAC investigation looking at activities that have occurred in the New South Wales division of the Liberal Party, and I'm a Victorian.
But you're the federal deputy leader, Senator. Surely you have some curiosity about this sort of activity in your party.
Yes, and do you know what? When I was with Brian Loughnane writing the review into the 2022 election, we specifically said that each division needs to make sure that its constitution is fit for purpose and that its membership is match fit to fight elections. I reiterate that point. It is so fundamentally important, but this is an issue for ICAC. It's not something that I can comment on. It's not something that the leader is involved in. He hasn't been named, he hasn't been called, he hasn't been approached. It's kind of very different distance, and I think that the ICAC should be allowed to do what it needs to do.
Absolutely, but should you as the deputy leader be willing to condemn this sort of sub-factional activity?
Well, I don't actually understand what the activity is all about. That's for ICAC, and ICAC are revealing exactly what's going on, so I don't want to comment on it. But I should say, and I'm happy to comment on, the fact that each of our state divisions should be undertaking a review of its own constitution and its own membership to make sure that we are the fighting fit electoral machine that we should be in the lead up to both state and federal elections.
A couple of other things. Fuel excise relief ends tonight. Is that the right call?
Well, we've supported the government in cutting fuel excise earlier on in the year when prices were particularly volatile. That was an important measure, we felt. And we even supported the government when it cut back on the fuel excise cuts to slowly taper that down. However, we did also expect that the government would find offsets for those costs in the budget. It failed to do so. That means that these cuts to fuel excise are going to cost Australians more and more. The real problem here, though, let's face it, is that while fuel is one of the great drivers of the cost of living crisis, there are others as well. And the government has failed to get the cost of living crisis under control by failing to get inflation under control. It's been more than 4.5 years now that the government has failed to get inflation under control. That's left our country far less resilient to shocks, and that's exactly what the Reserve Bank governor was saying just this week. If the government would get inflation under control by doing its fair share of the heavy lifting, using fiscal levers to manage inflation, not just relying on monetary policy, we would be in much better shape when these international shocks occur.
A lot there in that answer, but back to the question, is it right to end the fuel excise relief tonight?
Well, we would like to see the government deal with the primary cause of inflation and the cost of living, first and foremost, and we'd like to see the government genuinely not just deal with the short-term issue of fuel prices, but the long-term issue. That's why we've announced that we would double our reserves, our fuel reserves, that we would make sure that we introduce new storage and refinery capacity, that we look at new fuel sources like biofuels. This is how you fix the problem.
Ending the excise relief tonight, is there reluctance to say yes or no? You don't want to upset motorists?
Well, it's a decision for the government, but can I tell you that Australians are going to feel the pain? There is no doubt about it. They didn't need to feel this pain because the pain would have been lessened if we were a more resilient economy and that the government had done its fair share of the heavy lifting to get inflation down, and that would have solved the cost of living crisis. Instead, it's continued to spend, it's had its foot on the accelerator, and that means the Reserve Bank's had to put interest rates up. That's why Australians are feeling pain, and that's why this is felt even more acutely, these international shocks.
During this period, electric vehicle sales have taken off. According to the Australian Automobile Association, just over 49% of new car sales in the June quarter were electric or hybrid, so nearly half now. Does that surprise you, and do you welcome that?
No, I think that's the market speaking with its feet, and probably why we don't necessarily need more subsidies on electric vehicles. The market is doing exactly what it should. consumers want to see more electric vehicles in the market, they'll go out there and buy them. But unfortunately, the subsidy program that's been run by this government has run out of control. It's costing Australians more and more, and that's putting more pressure on the budget.
Angus Taylor has been arguing lately that the 5% home deposit scheme is available to migrants as soon as they arrive in the country. That's not right, is it?
Well, it's available to permanent residents, not just citizens. We've said that
not
we would like to see...
Not migrants as soon as they arrive in the country, though. Is that right?
We've said that we would like to see programs like the NDIS, like the 5% deposit scheme, like access to our very generous welfare system, limited to Australian citizens only.
Does the leader need to be a bit more careful, though, when he's talking about new migrants?
Well, I think we can be very clear. We want to encourage skilled migration. We want to make sure that we encourage permanent residents that are here to become citizens, because if you commit to Australia, we'll commit to you, and I think that's a very reasonable position to take.
Final question. Labor MP Luke Gosling has been charged with assault. He denies the allegation, but he hasn't been stood aside from his position as a special envoy in the government for Northern Australia Defence and Veterans Affairs. What's your view on this? What should be the bar for standing a special envoy aside?
Well, absolutely, Anthony Albanese should stand aside his special envoy. This is a pretty serious charge that has been laid against Luke Gosling. He's been charged of a serious assault. Now, it's alleged at this stage, but the charge has been laid. Anthony Albanese has been very quick to condemn other people and request in previous lives that Prime Ministers stand down their ministers or their senior members of Parliament. For far less, I think that he should live up to his own high expectations and stand Luke Gosling down.
So Mark Butler this morning has argued he's not a member of the executive, he's basically a backbencher. Does that make it different?
Well, then why give him the charge of special envoy and the privileges that go with it? I think that you should be very consistent in your approach. If Anthony Albanese was consistent, if he was a man of the genuine integrity that he claims to be, well, then he would stand Luke Gosling down.
Deputy Liberal Leader Jane Hume, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, David.